Hello, my name is Brant Hunt. The channel I have here is Discerning What is True. And I'm going to be reading tonight, that is the 11th day of December 2022, on the Redemption Manual 4.5. And we'll be dealing with the sovereignty of the people. So I hope you enjoy it. Again, you're welcome to ask questions here. You can chime in as I'm doing this live tonight. So here we go. So the next section I'm going to read here from the particular book here, Redemption Manual 4.5, is called Sovereignty of the People. While the relationships between man and the social compact, known by many names to name but a few, such as alliance, empire, kingdom, nation, organization, confederacy, and state, has been hotly debated topic throughout known history, little has changed over time in their relationship except for the means used to control the alien masses of such compacts. The man on the street still exclaims, "But what can I do?" The power brokers continue to manipulate the world stage from behind the scenes, using every technology and dirty trick at their disposal to maintain their tight-fisted control over the alien masses that appear, despite much complaining, unable or unwilling to assert their authority to emerge into any other political status freely determined by the people for their own safety, that is, their liberty and pursuit of happiness. Since the reasons for this so-called state of affairs are numerous and complex, we will focus on exploring those issues most central to the subject of the sovereignty of all people in this short essay. And again, like I said in my previous video, it simply is you cannot be sovereign unless you own the property, own the land you own. Many think this simply is that they have a title, but what they have is not a title. They have a certificate of title. Certificate, in my opinion, is simply a copy of the title, so to speak. But that title should be called allodium or allodial title, which is where it means that you are sovereign, you see. You cannot do certain things in certain places because some people have come along and created what I would call these statutes that says you cannot have something in your yard. It may be a certain tree. It may be a garden. It may be certain animals, whatever. Because the many dominate the individual because it's a democracy, not a republic. So let's continue. So the history of the word sovereign may be traced from the past up to the present through its many forms, meaning in the past meaning super, S-U-P-E-R, Latin, above, superiorus, spelled S-U-P-E-R-A-N-U-S, Old French from Vulgar Latin, as sovereign, as it S-O-V-E-R-A-I-N, Middle English. There's some speculation that one of the English monarchs modified sovereign so that it would include the word reign, resulting in the present form. Most people equate sovereignty with justice, freedom, and liberty. But what he's saying here is with the word reign in the last five letters, I should say, means that they're the king of their property. That's not what's occurring today. By liberty, we mean that the assurance that every man shall be protected in doing what he believes to be his duty against the influences of authority and majorities, customs, and opinion. And this would be an example simply is what right does the government have to know what you're doing in your bedroom? It's none of their business. That's being sovereign. It doesn't matter what's going on. That's none of their business what you do in your house. Are you doing any damage to others? Are you hurting someone? Have you done some type of damage to someone or done hurt them or whatever? No. Then it's none of their business. They don't have jurisdiction in that regard. Unless there's been something done wrong, they have no jurisdiction. Period. I'm adding that. That's not what's in the deal here. I'm just adding it. By justice, we mean the machinery to protect one while exercising these principles. And by freedom, we mean the exercise of liberty from such machinery of justice to accomplish the outcome of all three conditions of sovereignty within the frame of equality for all people. Ultimately, the sovereignty enjoyed by a people is determined by the price/sacrifice that they are singularly, joined, and severally, collectively willing to pay, parentheses, pledge, to ensure their enjoyment of such, and this itself is dependent on their education, identity, perception, responsibility, access to a free flow of unmanaged information, and the balance of power between the majority and the minority that seek to control them within the framework of the social compact which people construct for the enjoyment of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness of the signatory members and the posterity of such compact. When they mention compact, it just simply means to be like a constitution, what we call a contract also between one person to the other. When the forces of control operate in secrecy, the effect on private liberty has always been catastrophe. Everything secret degenerates, even the administration of justice. Nothing is safe that does not show how it can bear discussion and publicity. If such discussion and publicity is for the greater good of the whole, as pertaining to the signatures and posterity thereof. The fate of every social order based on the sovereignty of people depends on the choices it makes between these opposite principles: absolute power on the one hand, and on the other, the restraints of mores and tradition within such compact that creates a society for the exercise of the sovereignty of people. It is inarguably that men are the creators of the constructs of social order, so it follows that man is sovereign over his creations. It is also inarguably that the words substitute for social order, like the state and so-called government, are really just convenient abstractions that are entirely without reference. There is no person or thing that can be ascribed to these linguistic expressions. Man is the state, lest we forget this. Do you understand what he's talking about here? It's an abstraction of government. Who are these entities? What is this? This is an abstraction. The state, the government. It's not real. We created it ourselves. Think about that. And finally, all social order has a higher value than anarchy. It is paramount to peaceful and productive social relations as long as men have disputes. Some forum sanctioned by mores and traditions will likely be formed to resolve them at a preferable alternative to war. Of course, even Scripture speaks of this. If you have something against your neighbor, it points out wisdom simply is try to get that settled before you go to the court, because you don't know if you are going to win that issue in court. And why would you want to go that far? Because you may lose everything, or you may have to pay a astronomical sum. Continue here. Given the assumption of the preceding paragraph, the sovereignty of man over government, the necessary necessities of social order, and resolutions of disputes, the sovereignty of people. This then reduces to the problem of how to set up a social order that will, over time, prevent this hierarchy of power from becoming inverted, where the arbitrary whims of the few subvert the freedoms of the many. The most certain test by which people judge whether a compact is really free is the amount of security enjoyed by all touching upon their contractual nexus as appertaining to safety, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness within the social compact. And what he's saying here is very simply, do you feel free to do what you're doing without anyone, quote unquote, causing harm to you? that you're at liberty to do these things, that you're doing no harm to anyone else. The condition of whether or not minorities exist within the framework of the social compact reflects the nature of the true equality of each people to one another. If the sovereignty of each people is to be guarded by the principles of equality for all sovereigns, then the concepts of minorities or degradation of or by any of the social compact members towards one another would be a breach of the sovereignty of any one people at the cost of the sovereignty of all people. So for true sovereignty to exist for all people, the idea of a minority within the framework of a social compact where peaceful sovereignty exists for all people would be non-existent. It wouldn't work unless all people are sovereign, so there is no minority. See, this is how they play upon you. Where any disrespect could be or would be allowed in any public display. Sovereignty is destroyed for that people and injury has occurred against the peace and dignity of all. This does not mean that if such a people cause any member of the social compact to react to the deeds of one or another, which may appear to be categorized in some manner of expression, which under similar conditions would be considered a breach of peace. But goes on to say that such expression has been brought to the public's attention due to the actions of another, which may or may not disrespect one people or all people, depending upon the nature of the act or expression and whether such could be considered to deliver a message of respect or disrespect towards one or another. All actions of social compact individually, jointly, and severally must be guided by the principles of the social compact concerning dignity for the innocent when deciding whether or not a particular action shall be allowed or curtailed for the benefit of all by measuring the social redeeming qualities of any action within the framework of the social compact for the safety, liberty, and pursuit of happiness for all sovereign people. At one point in a private discussion with some liberal-minded folks regarding sovereignty, someone is in attendance to declare, "We are all sovereign. People are free to discuss any topic people like, and people come and go as all people please." Does this sound like something that you or a friend might say? Let's see how true that might be, exploring our alleged status as free men and women, or gentlemen and ladies, guaranteed by the Bill of Rights, Declaration of Independence, and the Constitution of the United States of America. Objectively will require that we examine our assumptions and understand something about the nature of the techniques and politics of control. Let's say that you were really an evil person, that you wanted to control a group of people, large or small, without having to constantly fight to maintain control. How might you approach this? Logic dictates that you could accomplish such a goal by changing things incrementally in such a way that they were barely noticeable, all the while maintaining appearance to be the same, until one day everything was inverted and you had eaten out. Until one day everything was inverted and you had eaten out all the substance. In other words, there's nothing there. In this way, you could carry out your plans for conquest without calling attention to yourself, building a prison without bars. By controlling your minds, your evil would be manageable as long as your game plan stayed hidden, was tolerated by the majority, and the worst aspects of his abuses remained hidden from plain view. You could accomplish this by hiding your identity behind multiple levels of corporations and many levels of agents, some whispering in the ears of employees of your mother's corporation, such as presidents, Supreme Court justices, congressmen, and senators. You might even make some of your corporations appear to be attached to your mother federal corporation, like the Federal Reserve and the Internal Revenue Service. Case in point, a quite bloodless revolution was carried out of the soil of the so-called North America in the early 1930s. So sophisticated in its planning and so flawless in its execution that over 70 years later, the majority of so-called Americans are still unaware that it even occurred. It remains the standard for techniques in revolution. Read People's Pottage, P-O-T-T-A-G-E, by Garrett, G-A-R-R-E-T-T, G-A-R-E-T. In fact, some still honor some of its perpetrators as so-called American heroes. It was the largest theft in world's history. All property, biological and physical, including our labor, was pledged to the invading army. The nature of this conspiracy to defraud all people may be gleaned from studying the following comments quoted from a meeting between Mr. Woodrow Wilson and Colonel Edward Mandell House, based upon 1920. House, who as some researchers speculate was the voice behind so-called President Mr. Wilson, was one of the major conspirators in the triumph of establishing the Federal Reserve System. His book, Philip Drew, Administrator, was disguised as a novel to dupe the masses. It was the blueprint for the radical social revolution that enslaved the military social construct known as the United States during Mr. Wilson's administration and continued under Mr. Franklin D. Roosevelt's so-called presidencies. Here's a quote. Very soon, every American will be required to register their biological property. This is from Philip Drew's book, meaning your human body, in a national system designed to keep track of the people and that will operate under the ancient system of pledging. By such methodology, we can compel people to submit to our agenda, which will affect our security as a chargeback for our fiat paper currency. Fiat means there's nothing there. It's all belief. And that's based upon Federal Reserve notes. Every American will be forced to register or suffer being able to earn a living. Example called the beast number. They will be our chattel, and we will hold security interests over them forever by operation of the law merchant, Lex Mercantile. Under the scheme of secure transactions, Americans, by unknowingly or unwillingly deliver the bills of lading, that is their birth certificate, to us will be rendered bankrupt and insolvent, exchange their energy for worthless debt instruments, forever to remain economic slaves through taxation, secured by their pledges, that is your Social Security card. They will be stripped of their rights and given a commercial value, that is their straw man, designed to make us a profit, and they will be none the wiser, for not one man in a million could ever figure out plans, and if by accident one or two should figure it out, we have in our arsenal possible deniability. After all, this is the only logical way to fund the government, by floating liens and debt to the registrars in the form of benefits and privileges. This would inevitably reap to us huge profits beyond our wildest expectations and leave every American a contributor to this fraud, which we will call social insurance. These, without realizing, every American will insure us for any loss we may incur, and in this matter, every American will unknowingly be our servant, however begrudgingly. The people will become helpless and without any hope for their redemption, and we will employ the high office of the president of our dummy corporation to form this plot against America. That's the end of the quote from Philip Drew. The above comment was actually written by a particular guy, Q-U-I-T-A-M, as a reality shock treatment, but it is what they're doing today. Now, with regards to your rights, or are they privileges, ask yourself, how is it that you came to believe that you were party to this construct or a contract to any social compact to claim such rights under such contract? Were you introduced to stories about the so-called founding fathers and showing various speciation of them standing around at the signing of these contracts? Were you told how they fought for freedom for you and all your posterity? Well, suppose that someone were to write a social contract and call it a constitution with a group of my friends and send it to you with the claim that it is now the law of the land, that it makes you free, and that you and your family must abide by it or face censure of traitors or as enemies of our creative social compact of states, or whatever we choose to call the various jurisdiction or forms established to carry out the intent of the parties to the compact known as the Constitution. What would your reaction to that scrap of paper be? Does it make sense that you would be bound to that little agreement even if you were not party to that private discussion that led to its creation, or at least gave you consent and signature it? It is possible that people outside social compacts which create such constitutions are free in their safety and liberty and pursuits of happiness, even if so constitutions do not exist. Do you know that the so-called Constitution of the United States for the United States of America was incorporated into bylaws of the United States located in the District of Columbia, where it was incorporated in 1871? And this is the the contract, the social, sorry, the, I had it in mind, it's what took place when the United States went bankrupt. It was an excuse. And the District of Columbia became what we would call, all caps, United States of America. Do you know that the 13th and 14th and 16th Amendment were fraudulently enacted, and these fraud renders the entire contract invalid on its face, but illicitly taught to be applicable to the sovereign people, when in fact it operates only and solely over all the employees of the corporation. So you've been duped. Do you see now why the so-called president routinely legislate outside the restrictions of their corporate constitution? If any part of a contract is found to be fraud, the entire document is dishonored. It's fraud. Okay, it's called the Organic Act of 1871. That's what it's called. Those who have more power are liable to sin more, aren't they? I add that, aren't they? No theorem in geometry is more certain than this. We have reached a state in which everything has been inverted. The majority suspect that there is something terribly wrong with the concept of the idea of a social compact of government, as we are taught existence in public school, and the application of which we are taught bears out different in everyday application as to the exercise of those teachings. But on the whole, they do not really want to deal with the evil that lurks therein. They are content to live their lives from day to day, buffered by the distractions that define their existence. This is the mentality of the slave, not a slave. Sorry. This is the mentality of the slave, not a sovereign people, who are capable of correcting, abolishing, or creating solutions to their condition, not only for their benefit, but also for their posterity. The unwillingness to act is the mentality of people who do not care about the world their progeny will inherit. That's your children. And it's been passed on down from grandfathers to their fathers to now the children, so to speak. This is the mentality of extreme selfishness and dedicated to personal comfort above all else. This does not go unnoticed by the controllers, who view this as a sign of acceptance that they can ratchet dice a few more turns. There is no sovereignty where people have fallen prey to the mind control agencies or the agendas of the men who rule from the shadows. There is no sovereignty for people who will not bargain for their rights. There is no sovereignty for people who lack the courage to face evil and stare it down. To think that you have sovereignty while nurturing these things is to live in a fantasy before you can be free. It is imperative that you come to understand how you are currently being controlled. When King Louis, the XIV, I guess it would be the 14th, King Louis XIV of the social fact known as the Kingdom of France, was asked where he got the power to assert his authority, he declared, "I am the state." King Louis XIV knew a secret that the majority of sovereign people who wished or think that they are free haven't yet discovered, that sovereignty must be asserted. There is no fence sitting when it comes to sovereignty. If you are not willing to self-govern in a form acceptable to the international public order by creating a social compact for your safety, liberty, and pursuit of happiness and the benefit of your posterity, you surely will be claimed by those who will. You only have the rights that you have bargained for contractually. If you are not a party to a social contract by signature, you only have the privileges that those who did bargain are willing to extend to you. There are no imaginary jurisdictions on this planet, and you are not party to any of the contracts that you learned about in their history lessons. If you are not laboring under the common misperception that you are party to a contract that you never signed or bargained for, such as the so-called Constitution, the Declaration of Independence, or the Bill of Rights, you have been deceived. But then without this assumption, their control of the matrix over you would have begun to unravel, wouldn't it? And if you believe that you are a beneficiary via the trust your so-called forefathers created, then as such you are accepting the benefits of the federal corporation and are subject to their rules and statutes, and it is a no-win situation. So that's the conclusion of this particular deal here, talking about sovereignty, and how the only way you're going to keep it is you have to fight for it. You have to stand for it. That doesn't mean, militarily. That's not what I'm talking about. But you have to be assertive what's going on here and be aware of what is going on. And like he says in the 1930s under Franklin Roosevelt, basically he changed our form of government. Most people are unaware of that. And you had a way of actually steering your money at one time. It had silver certificates and gold certificates underneath of it, and that you could go to the bank. If it was a $20 bill, you would get $20 worth of gold or $20 worth of silver. You don't get anything of that nature. In fact, you're not even paid hardly any interest on the money itself, because they created it out of nothing, folks. That's what they do. So I hope you enjoy the reading of this particular book. I hope that you will become aware of this. It's important for you to understand where you are. We are at the end game here, folks. This is where we're at. Most of you are completely unaware of what's going on around you. It's going to become more and more, in your face in the near future. And that's why it's important for you to understand who you are and what you're about, and see the importance of this. So again, I appreciate you listening and attentively. Again, if you have questions, I'll be glad to try to answer those questions. Again, I encourage you to read this information, to take responsibility. Freedom is not free, folks. It's not. Never has been, never will be. And unless you're vigilant and consciously aware of what's going on, that the police have stolen from you, they'll continue to do it until you become aware of what they're doing to you. Have a good night. Take care.